We're moving right along with these beer characteristics, and this lesson is going to cover bitterness. Bitterness in beer. It is a key taste component in beer, primarily derived from hops. It's generally perceived as a lingering taste, sometimes building in the aftertaste and landing on the back of the tongue. The main source of bitterness is the iso-alpha acids created from the hops that we've added in the boiling phase of brewing. The iso-alpha acids are formed from the hops alpha acids through isomerization, which we've discussed in the wort production process section and the hops section. The bitterness adds balance to the sweet nature of the fermented beer, the sweetness that comes from the residual sugars, and the perceived sweetness from the alcohol. It's a balancing act that varies from style to style, but nearly all styles, if not all styles, bitterness should never add a harsh character to the beer. There are some causes for excessive bitterness that we need to be aware of. Overhopping is one cause. A large hop addition, particularly of high alpha acid hops, are used, it can add a harsh, drying, bitter finish. Old or aged hops can contain oxidized beta acids. These produce a water-soluble bitter compound in beer that can become overwhelming. Oxidation of the final beer and a wild yeast contamination can also introduce an additional bitterness character, adding on top of the intended bitterness level from the brewing process. Bitterness is a signature character in some beer styles. First, well-hopped styles like IPAs and American barley wines. High bitterness is expected for these styles from the larger amounts of hops used to produce the wort. And dark beer styles such as American Porter and Imperial Stout. High bitterness is also expected and acceptable due to the roast malts used that complement and accentuate the bitterness. It's acceptable as long as it doesn't push that bitter character into an acrid or burnt character in the finish. Minerals in the water used to brew the beer also have an impact on the bitterness in beer. High sulfate water is commonly used in brewing British bitters, English IPAs, and German pills. The sulfates enhance bitterness and create a drier finish to the beer. The sulfates make the bitterness more pronounced without pushing it to the level of harshness. The bitterness beer characteristic in summary. Bitterness in beer primarily comes from iso-alpha acids in hops and can be carefully controlled. Excessive bitterness or harshness is usually a sign of overhopping, poor hop handling, or contamination. And if we find a bitter character excessive for the style of beer that we may be evaluating for our judging/tasting exam, we will want to include a note, something to the effect of, pay attention to hop freshness, boil times, and water profile to achieve the ideal balance of bitterness in the intended style. All right, that wraps up bitterness. Let's go on to that next lesson.